Hello all. Morning. Not evening, morning. How are we all? Welcome to Warriors here on a fresh slate Monday morning. That noise in the background, that's my printer, because obviously we've started home educating our daughter, which is a big thing. Today we're actually going to talk about the topic, which obviously links to education, and that is what skills and strategies do kids need to thrive within schools? But it's not just schools. I think we can talk about like all types of education when it comes to schools, colleges, even possibly homeschools. Who knows? Today I've gone down under. I'm welcoming an Aussie, Lisa Jayne. She's an awesome. I don't even know what this woman has not done. So I'll bring her on and please share this all in awareness. See you in a minute. Gosh, that's strong. No, I've got lemon and ginger this morning.
Nice. That's very healthy.
It is. Yeah, well, I don't like just having one tea bag. I like having two in there because it brings the taste out, but it's really strong this morning. But anyway, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here again. It's like the night time where I am, but I know that I actually feel quite honored because I am right at the beginning of your week. So we're setting everybody up for a great week this morning.
Exactly. Yeah. So education. We're all learning, aren't we? I believe we are our own teacher. And obviously, yeah. But I think before we crack on with this powerful topic, explain a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I think perhaps a little bit of backstory might be appropriate here because I've always, even since I was a teenager, been really fascinated by my emotions, and I was always very emotional and a lot of self-inquiry, and sort of, did my usual life, got married, had kids, all that sort of thing, and went back into teaching in my early 30s. At the same time, I had my kids growing up, and I could see how them going to school actually was really challenging for them. Like I started to really think about education and emotions, and I had this very natural, like in a very inquiring mind. And I'd been brought up with a whole lot of teachers. Like my dad was a teacher, my aunties, and like I was in a household where that was sort of the norm.
Yeah.
But I always sort of kicked against it. And when I became a teacher, one of the things that really stood out to me was how kids they get brought into these systems. They might have, who knows what goes on in their family life at home. They might be stressed. They might have parents that are upset or angry or whatever it is. They get brought into a classroom. They get told to sit down, be quiet, and start learning. And I don't know about you, Adam, but if I've ever had an emotional stress or I've been upset about something or someone's upset with me, there's no way that I could concentrate or even learn. Like I'm just not in a learning state. And so I started to really pursue this idea that the way we deal with our emotions is way more important than our academic knowledge. And in fact, if we got the emotion stuff right, then the academic side of things would just flourish, and it would make it so much easier for parents, for kids, and teachers. So I sort of went on that journey. Then I started working with women and men, and my experiences with people outside of the education system still brought to light how way back when we're young, there really isn't a lot of information given by our culture, like really practical education on how do we deal with our feelings? How do we use it to empower ourselves and create more connection? Because often we have a feeling and we get angry, or we feel so upset with ourselves that we create disconnection from ourselves. We often don't know how to express what we feel to other people without upsetting them and without creating conflict. Like, these are really simple, practical things that make us feel empowered if we could teach it to kids, especially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is brilliant. And obviously, the education. I'm glad you mentioned the word stress, because I've actually had a look, and it is National Stress Month. So that just ties in perfectly. But I believe the teachers are just as much as the victims as the kids are as well. But it all comes down to that lack of understanding, especially like when it comes to stress. What's the difference? Because you probably come across SEN kids all the time when you was teaching. What's the difference between teaching someone that's, for example, not on an autistic spectrum compared to someone that is? Like, what's the level of stress between both?
Well, I think you have to really, when you're teaching, your strategies probably have to be a little bit different, because you're dealing with a person that maybe needs different supports. And, like, really for me, I tended not to label people and go, there was people that need, that have mental health issues, people that have autism. And I didn't really do that. I came to that individual child just like I come to my clients now. And I have adults that have ADHD and sort of come to me and say, well, I've just been diagnosed with this. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I hear that. But for me, when I deal with people's emotions, it really doesn't matter. Like, all of that is a symptom of the underlying emotional frame that we have happening and that we live through, really. So as a teacher, if you think about it, like, the teachers are trained to just deliver information. And yet now children are so unique. They're so unique. And so when they're dealing with kids in a classroom, do they have the emotional skills to be able to regulate themselves back into a state of feeling empowered and feeling calm and peaceful? Because when they can do that, they help regulate the child. Or are they activated because they're frustrated, because they feel powerless, because they're not getting anywhere, because, the child is not responding or the child is resisting? So for me, the emotional understanding is like, if we got this right, you could actually create the most amazing connection in the classrooms. And I'm sure, Adam, you can remember teachers
I do.
that were really good at connecting with you, and you just wanted to learn. You were just like, I would do anything for this teacher. Like, I would walk over hot coals if you told me I had to, because he had the emotional connection going.
Well, I do admit I wasn't the perfect child in school. I was bullied. I admit that, and obviously we'll go on to bullying in a minute when it comes to education. But I admit I never wanted to be in school, which I think we all, us adults, we just never wanted to be in school, and we prefer to just chill or mess around. But now there's a saying in it: karma comes and bites you on the ass. And I feel like that's done with me, hence why I'm redoing my maths and English. Well, maths at the minute, but yeah, it's those stress levels. Like, obviously with my daughter, obviously I've now withdrew her, but the underlying stress she was coping with, like, the school just weren't picking up on the fact that yes, she has autism, she has social communication, but she was masking as well a lot. She was really isolated, and the school just didn't pick up on that, which actually puts into question, what do the teachers know about SEN?
Yeah. And to be fair, right, and I'm not sure what it's like in your country, but in Australia, teachers, I mean, the amount of time that they actually have to teach a child is really minimal by the time they do all the paperwork, and they have to perform all these, they've got to do all this self-accountability, they've got to do extra training, they've got to prove that they've actually, delivered things the right way. Like, there's so much admin, there's so much, and the teachers are under stress. So you've got a situation where the teachers are highly stressed, and so they're operating in that. That's the environment that's being created for the child. So the child is going in and the child feels emotionally unsupported and emotionally unsafe, because that would just happen if the teacher's feeling stressed. And if a teacher has a classroom full of kids, like, it's very hard to create emotional safety in that space. So you've got this environment that doesn't foster connection and doesn't foster learning. And
Absolutely.
it's just the way it's set up right now. So,
Absolutely. And go on.
well, I was going to say, like, to me, it's like it's this big, insidious monster, and I sort of think the only way out of it is if we start to come back to, well, what do I need to do for me? So if I'm a parent homeschooling, or if I'm a teacher in a classroom, it would be like, how can I understand myself emotionally enough so that I'm not activated? And I like to use the word activated rather than
Yeah.
triggered, because I think
Yeah.
triggered is really popular now, but it's like, triggered is like pulling a gun to my head, and it doesn't make me
The
feel like I
mindset.
want to do any self-inquiry, right? Whereas if I go, I'm activated now, what's really happening in my body, and how can I step back into my state of empowerment? Because if I'm in a state of empowerment, the words I use and the actions I take are much more effective. I get outcomes that I really want. But if I'm in a reactive state and I can't, my feelings are that I'm feeling explosive or angry or frustrated or resentful, anything that I say or do in that state, of course, is not going to have the results that I really want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it
So
all goes back to that fight and flight mode.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a real fundamental challenge for humanity now, that we start to really understand the way we work emotionally, and not just understand it with our heads, but understand feelings. How do I stop in the moment and feel the feeling? Oh, there's a feeling there. What's that about? What can I do with that, rather than let it explode or suppress it or act it out? But actually, how can I transform that feeling into creative power and into connection, so that I actually get the life that I really want to live? And for me, that's coming back into an emotional flow. And everybody can learn this stuff. This is not rocket science.
No.
It is
No.
practice, but it's not rocket science.
Absolutely. And yeah, going off the description, what the kids need to do to thrive in school, well, I think it all starts with the communication, because it's not fair on the child, the fact that parents and carers are always blaming the education for the faults they're doing, but then at the same time, when the child is under stress or they're messing around or whatever, the teachers are constantly blaming the parents and carers. So that misconception there, but there's no compromising. And like, I feel like teachers are failing to recognize that the kid is probably messing around is because the bored, or the feeling that pressure of, like, for example, exams, which, to be honest, I don't think any child needs exams. I don't. And the reason behind that is because it does pile stress onto the child, which probably could activate mental health issues within them. And yeah, it's like I feel like the teachers, when it comes to exams and revision, they're practically pushing that child to like, get on with it. Let's do this.
Yeah,
Which I
and they don't
know,
have any
it's
choice,
words of
really.
encouragement. Yeah.
Teachers don't have any choice. They're like, well, we've got to get these outcomes taught in this year, because kids aren't repeated very much anymore. Like in the old days, they would just repeat a kid, but now it's like, no, just push them on, push them on, push them on. So they've got to meet these outcomes. And and I think the biggest thing for me is, even before everything, if parents can teach their child how to deal with what they're feeling, because if a child is acting up in the classroom, or whatever sort of behavior we term acting out, exactly is that they are acting out the feelings that they haven't had the opportunity to process and express. So if and that for me, like, that's like, just let's start there. Let's start with holding a space for our children even earlier to be able to, like, let's acknowledge the feeling, let's validate the feeling they're having, and just make it more normal, even in the home, for them to be saying, the feeling that I'm feeling in my body is, or when you say that, and for us to model that to the kids, really, because that's how they learn.
Of course.
Like, if our kids say something to us that makes us, and like, you'd know this feeling, right? When your kids behave in a way or say something to you and you feel like this incredible sense of powerlessness
Yeah.
and frustration. And I've just learned to remind myself that in this moment, I can use what's happening to create more connection, which builds both of our empowerment. And if I look at it like that, I pause for a minute and I'm just like, oh, okay. And I'll say, my daughter's 15 now, but I'll say to her, when you shared that with me, it landed on me as a feeling, and I actually felt really powerless. Right. So I've expressed my feeling. And then she gets to hear me saying that. And in that moment, I can bring myself back to some sort of, I'm comforting myself because I've accompanied myself in the feeling. And then I can step into that. Okay, I'm in an emerging process with her. We're both learning, we're both growing. And then we can start to have this conversation. And somewhere in that, a solution appears. But if I don't allow my feeling to actually come out and be processed, I never get to emerge into the next moment. But instead, I just get stuck in this, those repetitive cycles that you feel, where you feel the same thing over and over again. It's because we haven't actually felt the feeling and owned it and used it to create more connection. So we never get to move forward, and grow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll get to Lisa's comment in a minute because it's absolutely powerful. But it's basically like, with all this, teachers, like, it's mainly the head teachers that are saying it, sit down, be quiet, and speak when you're spoken to. That needs scrapping altogether. I really do believe it needs scrapping, because when they're opening their mouth, these children, they're expressing their emotions and feelings. And I think that is so powerful, because they're actually connecting with themselves on a spiritual level. Like with me, when it comes to schools, I believe schools are too quick to push on to the behavioural side rather than the psychological and emotional side. And that's where the downfall within the education. And this is why parents and carers have a lot of problem with the education, because they're not doing things like this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it's like over there.
Well, it's really similar over here. And Adam, I think it's, for me, like, when I look at the system and the structure of the education system, I actually think that we just need to start creating what's going to work for us as a society, alternatives, because I personally don't look at these structures, because the structures are faulty from the very fundamental foundations. From the very beginning, they're faulty. And they set up power dynamics. So teachers that haven't actually owned their own emotional traumas, pains, experiences, and if a teacher feels powerless and you get a child that resists them, they get a sense of feeling more powerful because they can yell at a child. Like, it can set up these unhealthy power dynamics, and I feel this, the authoritarian and the person that has to be submissive, which is what you're talking about. And I think in order for us to evolve as a species, we really need to start seeing how these power dynamics are actually set up and conditioned. Even the guru and the seeker, often the same power dynamics are set up. Anywhere somebody has to give away their personal authority in order to be accepted or to fit in or to please, you've got an issue then with not having self-agency. And I think we need to have self-agency, because otherwise it doesn't make for a happy, healthy life.
Absolutely. And obviously, going back to Lisa's comment, and obviously she has got a question, which is brilliant. They need to open up about their emotions. Absolutely. Hang on. Alexa, shut up. Yeah, that's my daughter's.
I love Lisa's other comment here, which I'd love to answer now.
Yeah.
How can we help children feel like they have power, that they're in control when they're going through exams, as it can cause so much overwhelm, especially if they're struggling in the system? Any thoughts? what I've discovered in the work that I do with people is that often when we haven't really fully understood our emotions, we can be in reaction and we can feel like we are, we're experiencing all these things that we haven't got control over. What I've noticed is that we often can't control events, people, things, exams, for example, stress from a school. But the more empowered I feel in myself, if I know how to come back to an empowered place in myself, then I can actually feel good about whatever's happening. I can feel more resilient. I can feel like, yeah, actually, I can cope with that. I can just take that next moment. So if I was a parent trying to empower my child, first of all, I would definitely be hearing how they feel and validating, like you can see, and not just looking at what they're saying or doing, but it's like, I guess that might make you feel a little bit scared that you're not going to be good enough, or I guess that might make you feel. So you might just give them a few prompts, but it's just hearing the emotions. And as a mum, the biggest challenge, and probably also as a dad, the biggest challenge for me was to not try and fix them, but just to hear them and get curious, like, oh yeah, I get why that would make you feel that. And ultimately, what you want to encourage your child to do is identify with a feeling of empowerment in their body. Now, the way I do that for myself, and I've got a few different ways of doing that, but for a child, one way that you could do that is to encourage them to perhaps see the version of themselves that feels really overwhelmed and stressed and powerlessness. You could be saying, well, that version of you is very much like maybe you felt like when you were a little kid and you didn't have resources, and maybe that's because that is definitely what's activating in them. But just get them to see that maybe there's an aspect of themselves that they can feel powerless in, and invite them to create a different identity or a version of themselves, and you can have fun with it depending on the age of the child. But you really want to be able to hear the emotions, which diffuses the charge, and then be able to step into a feeling of empowerment. Now, if they have something they love doing, like I worked with a teen once and she loved surfing. And I'm just like, what do you feel when you go surfing? And she goes, oh, I feel so strong. I feel so good. Like catching that wave makes me feel so powerful. And I'm like, okay, can you feel that in your body? And she goes, yeah. And I'm like, well, when this happens and you feel stressed and powerless, you have to go, oh yeah, okay, I'm feeling stressed and powerless, and you're accompanying yourself, but then you're moving into that feeling state. So you want to try and feel that state of feeling empowered. So it's like we can't fix the education system, but we can create an alternative. We can't often fix how that system lands on us. But if we can encourage our children to create, and I've heard some people that encourage kids to create like a superhuman version of themselves, or give it a name, or give it a whatever it is, but attaching to it a feeling. So something that they love doing, or when they've been in a place where they felt so much joy and happiness, and they've just felt so full of love and connection, because we have a feeling memory of that. And it's almost like we want them to be able to recall that feeling memory at will, because that then places them into quite an empowered position in their body. And so they're giving off empowered vibes instead of, feeling like I can't cope with this. And then they're able to make decisions, right? Because they've taken themselves out of this disconnected state of emotional agitation, and they've moved themselves back into this good feeling state and bringing in a memory. So you might have to work with your child, Lisa, if you can find something that they love to do that just absorbs them and feels so good. It's like, remember that feeling, and that's what you want to try and bring in at these times, because you want to fill that up.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you, and I see that Caroline has dropped a heart on this live. So hello, Caroline. But yeah, it's all about reconnecting, and it does make sense, Lisa. You're absolutely right, and like last summer, I had a family member message me on Facebook saying that I'm struggling, I'm really stressed because I've got these exams coming up. And I'm like, okay, then. So I worked with her for about 10, 15 minutes because that's all it was. And I'm like, what do you know about positive affirmations? And she's like, I don't know much. I'm like, okay, right. So I gave her a few statements to say herself while from going from where she is into the exam. And even then, while she's focusing on the exam, constantly say these positive affirmations to yourself. And she did that. And then after it, I messaged her saying, right, so how are you feeling? And she's like, much better, thanks. Like, because that's exactly what you need to do. So, hi, Caroline, you're right. So, my question is,
Caroline.
do you think, because like my son's high school and stuff like that, do you think the teachers or even the education system put grades, attendance, punctuality over the kids' needs and what they can actually provide?
The way I'd like to answer that, Adam,
Yeah,
is that I personally don't think, for me, it's worth wasting my time even thinking down that avenue.
yeah,
What I would rather do is empower my child to be able to walk into any situation and not let it sap the way they feel
yeah,
about themselves.
of course.
So I'm not going to argue with you. I definitely agree that systems are faulty. However, if we
Yeah,
keep looking at that, like I personally think that this is
finding the
what it
negatives. Yeah,
is. It gives us the opportunity. Well, it gives us the opportunity, doesn't it, to say to our
yeah,
kids, hey, you've got an opportunity to take your power back. You know, when they come home and they're like, oh, I feel so powerless. It's like, great. How can you take your power back in this situation? Because if you learn how to do it right now at school, when you go out in the world and you're in the workforce, or when you go out and you have a relationship and you feel powerless, if you haven't learnt those skills of how to step back into your personal power, then it will affect your mental health. So if I
exactly.
can encourage our kids to see everything as an opportunity, because that's really what it is. Life is going to throw stuff at us all the time, and it's our capacity to be able to come back into our true state of empowerment and not feel like we might not be able to control that situation, but we can always grow and feel better in ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's jumping right onto what my daughter said because, like when she came home, I'm like, okay, what have you learned today? Oh, we've learned about mental health. I'm like, brilliant. What have you learned about it? Oh, understanding the labels like depression, anxiety, trauma, and how it impacts us. I'm like, brilliant. Okay, what about the emotional side to it? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay. So I got a little bit frustrated about that, which I know that's a choice. So she basically said for a few weeks now, before we withdrew her, I basically said to her, right, well, she actually said to us, Dad, I want to learn more about myself, my self-identity. So I'm like, brilliant. Okay, let's do that. So now obviously I've created a timetable with her, which I've got the tab open, and we're gonna crack on with it. Like the
That's really good.
communication side in it, the emotion side in it. We're gonna
Yeah.
cover all that.
And I think really, for also, like, just on what we were talking about before, it is very hard for young kids to empower themselves in a system that is
Yes.
authoritarian. So while it's an opportunity for them to take back their power, I do think that parents are responsible for looking after their child's well-being when they don't have the
Mm.
resources and the capacity. I've heard some parents like going, well, they've got to learn to toughen up, but it's not about that, because sometimes our kids need us to accompany. Even now, like, my teenage daughter has a lot of resources, but sometimes I might need to accompany her into a new situation until she builds that strength for herself.
Yeah.
So especially for a parent, Like for me, every time I'm activated by a situation that my child goes into, or even a school, or seeing my child being stressed, for example, like I could get activated, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This so stressed. That's actually my opportunity. How can I get out of that feeling? Because I can't help my child if I'm not regulated. The best way for
Exactly.
me to
Yeah,
help my
because we're
child
their
is
role
to,
models. They look up to us.
yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah.
look. They turn to us for the answers.
And they
And
need us to be
yeah,
able to
yeah,
be, they need us to be emotionally, well, emotionally regulated. Like for
yeah.
me, being able to hold that emotional space for my daughter enables her to process whatever she's feeling. But if I come to her, if what's happening with her is activating me and I'm like, I'm unregulated, then she's just going to feel not emotionally safe, which means she can't process what she's feeling,
Yes.
at the moment because she's younger. So, it's like as parents, we have a responsibility not only to ourselves, but to our kids to be able to
Mm.
understand our emotional responses and know how to get ourselves back into an empowered state so that we can hold that space for our kids to be able to process their feelings.
Absolutely. And like right now, she's learning the times tables because she does struggle with it. So obviously, her mummy is basically teaching her like methods of actually getting it. So like once we're done with all this, like give it a few weeks, she's going to be answering questions of timetables within less than 3 seconds. And this is exactly why our late great friend Philip Chant said because he was a maths genius and he just inspired a lot of people. So we've picked up on what he's taught as well. So yeah, and that's why my son's where he is today because
Mm.
of people like Philip.
Well, you've got a great journey ahead then, haven't you, Adam?
I have, yes, but obviously with my son, obviously the school he's at, obviously they take from 10 and he could be there till he's 18, 19, but
Mm.
we believe he ain't going to be there until he's 18. We believe he's got like a couple of years left and then that's it. He could be off to university because he's already doing college level maths.
Mm.
So, yes.
It's really interesting, isn't it, as a parent?
Yeah.
Like, I think how much we are required to be able to just feel at ease with whatever's happening. So, because I had four very different children, and my expectations with my older ones sometimes made me feel like I wasn't good enough as a mum
Of
and
course.
I had to fix them and I had to make things right. And I think really this whole allowing of however they turn up is just, for me anyway, it's been so empowering to question myself. If I have something
Yeah.
that they turn up in a way and it really activates me, it's like I need to look at that, because the more I can be at ease with whatever happens, because our kids are so different, every single one of them will turn up differently, and respond differently to different things, and that's why it makes parenting so hard. It's
Well,
not one size fits all.
but thing is though, as Eric Thomas said, it's hard, but it's not impossible.
Mm.
And then obviously when my son was in reception in school, obviously back then, me and his teacher did work together a little bit because before the bell went, believe it or not, he's absolutely brilliant with numbers, and I actually introduced him to numbers through a snakes and ladders grid, which I think is brilliant method because you practically turn in times tables through a game, and then obviously because obviously there was 30 children in his class, but and that's plus him. Obviously, the class teacher had this grid from 1 to 100, and every morning she used to muddle it up. 29 kids didn't notice. Lucas straight away picked up on it and he solved it straight away.
Mm. That's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those sort of natural abilities. And I think for a kid to have something to hang their hat on, like whether it's maths or whatever it is, that they can feel like they're really good at that particular thing. I
Oh,
think
he
that's
is.
really healthy for a child, like, because they can sometimes feel quite lost when they become teenagers. But if there's
Yeah.
something that they feel good at, whether it's a sport or maths or, whatever it is, musical instrument, I think that's really good, a good foundation to sort of help them go through puberty and into life.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think the school's struggling with them at the minute because there's 4 different teachers trying to challenge him on maths, and they're all struggling because of he's just there. Because like when he had a look round before, obviously the head of maths was there, and obviously she had things on the whiteboard which she's been learning, and obviously he got hold of the pen and wrote some calculus on the whiteboard, and she's like, "What's that?" She didn't know. So she literally had to, while it was 6 weeks holidays, she literally had to spend her time going to the college to get work just for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
and
like
that's
maybe the more of this is going to happen more and more as the kids that are coming
the
through
next
are a lot more
generation.
aware. And that's right, because they're exposed to so much information. Like just through technology, they have so much more information at their fingertips. And I personally don't think schools are going to be able to keep up with that for very much longer.
I agree.
So if I can sum everything up, there's one more thing that I'd like to say, which I think is
Go for it.
the best thought for parents when you're raising kids of any age. I've learned that if I can focus on the relationship that I have all the time and make that the most important thing in a moment of feeling heated, in a moment of feeling the agitation, if rather than me thinking, how can I fix this or make this right or make this kid do what I want them to do, if I'm thinking instead, how can I use what's happening to actually deepen the relationship that we have and
Yes.
understand each other better and feel more connected? And if I keep that mindset, then all through puberty, I'm going to have a much better relationship with my child and I'm going to feel much better about it. So for me, that was just a massive key to actually change the way I think about what's happening right now into an opportunity. And I
Yeah,
think that's
absolutely. Yeah.
very powerful.
Absolutely. And obviously, as you say, when we do get activated, don't see it as a mistake because we seem to always go for the mistake side. See it as an opportunity to grow as well,
Yep.
to actually
Yep.
learn. Because, as I said from the very start, we are our own teacher and we can only learn from ourselves.
Yep.
And with the right support network as well.
That's right. Yep, you need support. Sometimes we do need to reach out for resources. That's true.
Yes, it is. It is. It is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so what do you think the education actually needs to change? What do you think they do? Like, what do you think they should provide to not just kids as well, but to parents and carers?
Mm. Well, if I was queen of the world, I think
Here we
that
go.
I would start with how we feel in any moment. So at the beginning of a school day, it would be a connection moment, creating safety, emotional safety, what's going on, how can I express what I feel, how can I learn more, and not just about learning about feelings. Like I know this in Australia anyway, they've started to do a lot more around this is a feeling and, you know, and learning more about how to express feelings. But underneath those feelings, there's a reason that we feel a particular way all the time because
Yeah.
3 people can see the same event, but only one person is activated by it. What is that? When we understand ourselves and the way our emotions work, we understand what activates us and we start to be able to use those things to know ourselves better. And I think that self-knowledge, because really teaching kids information these days is just like ludicrous because they can get anything they want to know on Google, whatever it is. So I personally
I'm so
believe
glad you mentioned that.
if we started to
I'm
teach them like relationship skills, how do you tell someone how you feel without creating conflict? How do I share what I feel in a way that I'm not filtering what I really feel because I'm scared about how it's going to land on them? Like those sorts of things can be easily taught as skills. And they're so empowering because when I know what to do for myself, when I know how to read myself and work out what emotional need I have and then meet that need, I can step into any moment. I'm not scared of things. I can lean into conflict. And I personally think that those sorts of skills, if taught in a system of education, would be incredibly beneficial for our species.
Absolutely, and you've made me remind myself what my son said, because he's now in his third school, and he's practically done all them years. Well, 1 year of it he was home educated, but other than that, it like obviously we know what year he was in, but he's actually said when we withdrew him from the mainstream school because of the overstimulation, he said on his third day of being home educated, I have learned more from YouTube than I ever did in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also they want to watch YouTube, right? So they're like, they are creating.
It's on America though.
They're doing it themselves. Yeah. They're not just sitting there having it like piled onto them, you know.
No.
It's like it's a different world. And I just, you know, personally, I think I can't get into a school and change the system. I think the system's really, I don't know what's going to happen to it. I don't know, but I do know that we can start creating the change that we want. You know,
well, we can change the system, but we all need to start talking about it. So in a way we can, but people choose not to. People choose to stay silent, which that's their choice at the end of the day. But yeah, it's all about moving forward. So this world needs people like you and I to say enough's enough. Time to put the kids first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely think so. I think there's definitely a new creating connection in education, like connecting the kids with each other and with teachers, like because they don't foster connections, like the systems that we've got created don't foster connection.
No.
And people need that. Like that's really fundamental to our ability to thrive.
Exactly. Yeah, as well. But yeah, that's what it is. I don't even know what to say anymore. Any last words?
Well, I think really the more that parents can come back into their own really regulated, empowered state and know how to deal with reactions so that they can bring themselves back into a state of empowerment, that means they're open to creative solutions. So often with our kids, we don't know what to do. We sort of feel like, I don't know what to do. And when we're in reaction, of course we don't, because we're in a powerless state. Yeah. So for me, I personally think the solution is the more of us that can learn the skills of understanding our emotions and returning to this empowered state means we're modeling it to our kids, means we're using the words that our kids need to learn, and we're teaching them, really. Plus, they've got a parent that is able to hold a safe emotional space for them to be able to take back their own emotional power. And I think that is going to be one of the best ways to change a system, because you've got people who understand their self-authority. You've got people that are clear and can see new solutions, right? There's creative innovation happens when you're in that state. So I think we need more of that, because we need to find new solutions, right?
We do. And only that. Yeah, because like even my daughter now, I don't know if you can hear her in the background, but she seems a lot happier than she ever did in school, because she was isolated, she was quiet, and even then, like a few weeks back, we had one of her friends over, and we were basically asking her, so what's Tegan like in school? Oh, she's quiet, she's shy, but when she's at home, she witnessed what Tegan's like at home. She's loud, she's vocal. It's like, wow, I've not seen this before. Because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Because
feels safe.
Yeah, because it's a safe space for her. And then when she's in school, I feel like, and obviously you and I probably have the same, but we were programmed to say, right, you only talk when you're spoken to. You have to put your hand up if you want to go to the toilet, which that's wrong. We don't need
Yeah.
that. We should let
Yeah.
the kids freely be kids.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be breaking down. I think it's all got to change. Like there's just
It's crumbling. It is crumbling.
it is, because kids themselves are so much more empowered now with information and with knowledge, right? So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, well, obviously when my son was in mainstream, he was very vocal, and apparently I got the blame for it. Anyway. Well,
takes after his dad.
what do you expect? You learn from the best. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I know. Don't be a stranger.
A
Come back
stranger. I
anytime.
know. It's like the weeks just go so fast, right? Like I have all these plans, but it's like time, I'm sure, is speeding up. I feel like I'm just one weekend to the next, and it's like, I've also have to enjoy my life. So I do quite a lot of enjoying my life in between those moments. But yeah, it's fitting everything in.
Absolutely.
But it is good to see you, and I'm really happy for your daughter. I'm really happy that you've sort of brought her home, and that you're homeschooling her, and that she's really happy. It's great to hear.
Oh, she is happy. I'm surprised you can't hear her.
Yeah, I can hear her. It's great. It's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the school didn't see any of this. Well, that's their problem. Anyway, thank you for coming on. And what? Do you want me to say it live? Have you got a joke? Oh, here we go.
Why was the math teacher suspicious of the prime numbers apart from 2?
Why was the maths teacher
Suspicious of prime numbers all but 2?
Go on.
Well, they were all odd.
I don't know if you got any of that.
I didn't hear it. No.
Right, come back here.
Why was the maths teacher suspicious of prime numbers apart from 2?
Why was the maths teacher suspicious of prime numbers apart from 2? Because they're all odd.
They're all odd.
That's
a good one. That is a good one.
That is good. That's good.
Right.
And it's clean. What's more?
Exactly. Right. I'll see you all later. Please share. And we'll speak again. Bye.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks everyone for watching.